Well, welcome to the Church Office podcast.
My name's Gavin Smith, and if you're joining us on video, then here's a little wave.
We're excited to have Nigel Ring join us.
I've never actually heard the word wicked and accountant put in the same sentence.
Right, you ready for this?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. Hello and welcome to the Church Office podcast. My name is Gavin Smith, and it's a joy today to welcome you to our church administration, church admin and ops podcast. We love talking about the work of ministry behind the scenes. And our special guest today is Gavin Courtney from Churchsuite. Mate, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Not a problem at all. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's great to have you on, and I can't believe that it's been 2 years since the last time we got you on the podcast. It's just flown by. I remember being sat in your what was then new offices, and there was only a few staff there because really COVID was just kind of destroying everything. And everyone was at home, weren't they, for you? So tell us a bit about how's life in Churchsuite? How's the team and what you guys are getting involved in and doing? Fill us in.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it feels like we're in a really kind of exciting time. We're continuing to grow in all kind of senses in terms of both the product and what we're trying to do. We're always trying to make sure that we're at the forefront and building things that are really helping to support the felt needs our customers are talking to us about. There's more and more customers coming along. It's just it's a real honor to kind of be where we are and to I guess just continually see God's faithfulness of bringing more and more churches towards us, and in response we want to try and be faithful of listening, understanding and building and supporting all those churches as best as we possibly can. So yeah, really exciting time.
It's great. I mean, they're over. If you don't know about Churchsuite, then look them up straight away, because they are an absolute joy to work with, and the software makes a huge difference. I know you are one of the biggest fans for church admin and operations staff that I know, who say, have you got Churchsuite? Yes. All right, you're going to be okay. And you've got over 3,000 churches you're serving, and the staff is growing, and it's great. And you were just telling me beforehand that you were on an exciting trip to Australia. Fill us in a bit about that, because that just sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, it's been a bit of an interesting one. There's over the last kind of 12, 18 months or so, there's been more and more, just a gentle trickle of Australian churches coming towards us saying, "Oh, could we use Churchsuite?" Like, yeah, absolutely. Like it's global software. It's used in like 40, 50 countries anyway. And so yeah, we just kind of we had picked up on that a little bit, and then there was an individual in particular who he reached out and said, "I think you need to kind of come and really investigate whether Churchsuite's the right product to serve a large number of Australian churches." And initially I thought, well, it's a long way to go, and we've got lots of work to do. And so I kind of, in some ways, I think I zoomed with him, and then I was like, no, let's leave it. But then he just kept on coming back, and I was like, this is weird. And there was kind of that in Acts where it talks about the man from Macedonia calling Paul. And it kind of felt a little like, I don't want to get up too much, but it kind of felt a bit like that. I was like, why is this person saying come over? So anyway, I've just got back from a trip over there, really just kind of meeting with loads of different churches over a 10-day period, and just trying to understand what are the tools that they're currently using, how do they feel well supported, how do they not feel supported, and just asking that question of is God inviting us to try and actively step into that, and what would that mean in terms of making sure that the churches that we already support and work alongside, like the last thing we want to do is make any changes that would have a negative impact on them. And so just trying to work out here, what are the synergies and what are the differences, and actually, is it the case that there are certain things within the Australian church, things that they want to do that actually are things that we're already hearing people saying, we want to do that here. So some fascinating kind of conversations, and really exciting kind of.
I can imagine you just thriving in that and just enjoying that, because the new stuff and creative and thinking and some of the challenges, I bet that is just that's your happy place.
Definitely. Yeah, at heart, there is no doubt that I am a pioneer. I do have that. I mean, that's why I started. I started doing all this. That's why I start anything new. And so there's always, for me, I've always got to try and balance that pioneering side of me, whilst making sure that, if you start too many things or whatever, you end up with a bit of a trail of destruction behind you, don't you? So just trying to make sure that I'm both operating in the strengths and the gifts that God's given me, but also that I'm not creating too much chaos for those around me. So, it's a difficult balance, but
it's so true. And I think what you've done though, and what I can see from the cheap seats from outside, is you've got great staff. Every time I ring up or you interact with someone, you're finding people who connect, not just to want to be involved in Churchsuite, but have got the same kind of values, the same kind of heart. That local church heart just keeps on coming back every time you speak to someone, and I certainly appreciate that about you guys, and that must be really important for you.
It's vital. It ultimately, as much as people are kind of buying into a product when they start using Churchsuite, I think they're also buying into our heart and our vision for supporting the church. We are far from perfect. So many things that we can and will improve on, but the starting point has got to be that we find people who share the same visions, share the same passion for the church. There's a book that there's an author called Patrick Lencioni who's written a book called The Ideal Team Player. And for me, like in that book, he talks about you need to find people who are humble, who are hungry, and who are smart. And so there's so much of Pat Lencioni's stuff that's been a massive influence on me. But those three things, like whenever we're interviewing someone, we're asking questions into trying to work out, okay, where are you at on humility? Is this a problem for you? Like, do you know who you are? And you're using those things. But you can't lean towards arrogance. That's a difficult thing. Are you hungry? Like, have you got that inner drive and energy? Do you want to join us on this and support our customers? Like, do you want more? Do you want to see God doing more? And do you want to support what God is doing in churches? And then smart, like people smart, it makes or breaks so many situations. Like if you've got people with those good people smart skills, whether that's in customer support and just being an empathetic ear of, I hear what you're trying to do, now let me try and do that with you, or whether that's the developers, like, okay, a developer's lens on things can sometimes be quite different to the lens that someone in a support team might have. And actually being able to bring all of those different character attributes together and focusing around those three has been really helpful, I think, in us hopefully hiring really well and finding people that fit with the vision and hopefully want to continue serving and supporting the church for many years to come.
And it's so true, isn't it? We're kind of entering into discussion of kind of like staff culture, and I love some of Patrick Lencioni's stuff on this, and he's got some great books and worth reading, and people might be put off because they're not, they're kind of business focused in some ways, but there's such common grace that's in there, that how you relate to people, how you work together, the kind of character that's so important when you're hiring. He has some great stuff in there, and I think that really, one of your latest posts online, Gavin, which I connected with, was the missional leave stuff. The way that you're investing in staff and actually positioning your staff to say, we want you to focus on and serve the local church, not just in what we're doing at Churchsuite, but actually in your own individual gifting and opportunities to serve. And fill us in a little bit about that. Has that come out of your culture conversation, and that you've just implemented it, or were people asking for leave? What was going on?
So I give huge credit to one of our staff, Lindsay, who she linked me in with an article that I think Harvard Business Review had written about Patagonia, the clothing company. Patagonia are they've got a great staff culture, and they basically grew out of the West Coast American surfer lifestyle, where people were highly engaged in kind of green, sustainable, all those kind of
Yeah.
things. And they were kind of looking at me like, well, we need clothing that matches some of those kind of principles. And so as Patagonia, the company, grew, one of the things they found was that their staff, it started morphing from these kind of highly energetic surfer types into more corporate types. And so they started saying, well, what's changed here? And one of the things they identified was they were no longer hiring out of the same pool of people. They were no longer hiring out of surfers. They were hiring out of a kind of a corporate pool. And they identified that part of that was down to the fact that surfers love to go surfing. Like surfers love to get on a beach and start clearing it up. Surfers love to get involved in those things, but their corporate structures, whilst they started there, were no longer in that place. And so one of the things that they then started doing was, every few years they organized various different things to enable people to get out there and do kind of ecologically kind of sound and sensible, sustainable projects of, go and clean up an oil slick or go and do these kind of things. So Lindsay gave me this article and said, what do you think this means for Churchsuite? And I as we kind of talked about it, we're like, well, we want our people to continue being invested in the church. Many of our staff members were on staff at churches previously, and actually they used Churchsuite and then loved it so much that they ended up coming to work for us. That's kind of a bit of a story, but we want to support that. We were like, well, we don't want to damage the church in any way. How can we continue to encourage people to serve the church, capital C, and give of themselves? And so just piecing some of those bits together, we were like, well, one of the great ways we could do that is by giving everyone an allowance of 5 full paid working days on top of all of their annual leave. That if you want to go and serve at a youth camp, great, have our blessing, have our pay, go and do that, contribute, bless the body of Christ. You want to go and do something more humanitarian, you want to serve people on a rubbish dump in Mexico, or you want to go and do whatever it might be. It's like, yes, we want to support that. Like, God's kingdom comes when restoration to things comes, and God's people are served when we get out there and we do the stuff. So it's like, well, let's pay people to do that and make sure that we keep that as part of our culture. So so that's been a really exciting thing over the last, I guess it might be about the last 5 years we've done that, and just seeing more and more people choosing to do that,
great,
serving at conferences, youth camps, clubs. It's been brilliant. We really loved it.
I love it, and I think it's great, and I love the fact that you guys are promoting it and sharing some of the stories about it, and I think that really connects the software to the local church, to strengthening and building up the local church, that your staff culture, the things that you value the most, are all in that direction, and to serve the church and ultimately to serve Christ and the gospel going out there. And mate, it's well, let me encourage you, you're doing a fantastic job, and this, not only is the software great and the staff great, but the service, the new products, the new ideas, you guys are constantly thinking of stuff to do and make better. And I appreciate that.
It's such a balance, isn't it? Because there's always the tension of, like, you can't always just constantly chase new, because you've got to maintain and improve what's already there. But at the same time, it's like, when we hear good ideas, which get shared to us by customers, or just on the back of a conversation with the customer, like, we get excited about them, like, oh, we could see the kingdom benefit in doing that. We just love to keep doing it.
Some of my staff here at the church have nailed down new members' workflows. I've seen some of that, interacting with pastoral staff as well as administrative staff, and that everyone has a part to play in this. We've loved that has been great. People getting contact. The planning center stuff, the Sunday morning running orders, and working all those things through, working that through to CCLI. That stuff is great. There's just such key things that make our life so much easier. And I sleep better because of it, because of Churchsuite. This stuff is great. I've picked on 2 things that I'd love to kind of just chat through. One is the kind of this new resource planner that you've kind of launched. So you can do the room hire and stuff like that. Fill us in a little bit about that if someone's not heard about that from Churchsuite.
So what you're kind of touching on there is some functionality within the bookings module. So the bookings module is all about rooms and resources. You define all the different things that you've got to hire out, whether that's the church hall or the kitchen or whatever it might be. Particularly if you've got your own premises, then you've likely got rooms and resources that get booked out for certain things. And so for years we've had that bookings module, which has been primarily focused on making sure that internally all of the information is really accessible. Who's booked out what, and you can set up all the different questions to make sure you get all the good bits of information you need about that. But what this new planner that we've just launched does is it enables you to bring some of that information through into your church website. And certainly for anyone who's got a busy church, and particularly if you host weddings and things like that, one of the questions that you'll be fielding is, is the church available on this date, and what about this date, and or whether it's for guides or whatever whatever it might be. But that new free busy planner that we've built out effectively allows you to say, okay, the things that I want to show when they're busy, you choose those rooms and resources. So it doesn't have to be everything, and then you can put that into your website. And all it does is it says this is free or this is busy. So it doesn't tell you the information about who's booked things out or what they're booked for. Like we shouldn't really be sharing that kind of information on our websites. But it just
useful, isn't it? Because it's about 10 emails that go back and forth, isn't it? Is this date free? Is it not? And can we do this and can we not do that? And we've developed some around the whole thing about events. I think more and more we're getting more and more out of Churchsuite on that kind of stuff. So having the right forms that people can go through that goes, actually, when you do an event, these are the 4 or 5 things that you're responsible for. And then people being able to actually sign up for it, being able to pay for events and work through those things. All of that makes such a difference. So loving that.
And it's a really busy time for that. Lots of people lots of people find with their carol services that, particularly if they're running multiple services to help cater for the number of people, lots of people will either just have event pages to publicize that, or some people actually do say, well, we've got specific fire capacity in our venue, and so actually just making that as a ticketed event, it's a free thing for pretty much everyone that I know of, but it just helps you to manage that flow and understand, okay, that first service is going to be the one that we're going to hit full capacity on, but the second service, the third service, whatever it might be. So we see hundreds of thousands of people signing up to church events, whether those are carol services or newcomers meals or the Alpha course, Christianity Explored, all sorts. And it's just it's so cool to kind of see so much engagement and just get
because you guys get to see all that activity, I guess, don't you? I mean, you must know the stats. I love a bit of stats. So how many emails go out each week and how many people sign up and even just your giving stuff that people are giving through. I'm sure there's a huge number at the end of all of that.
We're obviously quite constrained in terms of what we see. We shield ourselves from being able to see too much information. So we certainly see that we're sending 5 million emails a month, or
I remember you saying it was something crazy like that.
It's crazy numbers, and some of those things, like, oh my goodness, when we take a step back, because every Christmas, so once a quarter, all of the team come together and we have kind of a quarterly offsite day, just looking at how we're doing, teaching into certain things, looking at different topics, and at Christmas time we always reflect on the last 12 months. So I'm going to be preparing the numbers and the stats, but every year just to take that step back and like, oh my goodness, the responsibility we have, but also the excitement to see just how much stuff is happening through the Churchsuite, and the ministry that we get to play a small role in supporting. It's super exciting. Love it.
It's great. And God has really blessed it, and you can see the fruit all over the place. So mate, for you and your team, just thank you, and be encouraged from what you guys are doing is tremendous. I want to touch on holiday clubs, because somebody was asking me this the other day, saying, tell us, how do you use Churchsuite in a holiday club kind of, situation? And I was thinking, okay, well, if someone, hears this kind of early December, they, new year, they sign up to Churchsuite and they start to think about holiday clubs. We've got February coming, spring, a lot of activity ramps up, doesn't it, as we get past sort of February. Fill me in a little bit on some of the technical stuff and functionality of that and how you might run that through, because you've got some case studies on the website that explain some of the stuff, but nothing like having the person in the room.
That's very flattering. Like, the reality is that more and more I realize that for certain kind of niches, there are things that, do you know what, there's far better people on the team than me to answer some of those specifics. I'll give this my best shot, but yeah, for anyone who's listening who wants more information, there's probably like Paul, Sue, Luke, like there's various other people on the team who've actually got much better insights into the detail of doing these things than me. But yeah, here we go. So I think my starting point would be to say, right, well, you're gonna put an event on your church calendar which people can sign up to, and you're going to ask parents to come along and sign up for their children. And on that event, you're going to be able to customize it, so you can put in all of the different fields of information that you need. So whether that's dietary requirements or school that the child attends, so you can try and group children together based on school or people they might know. Basically, you can customize that whole event sign-up form to get all the information you want on there. So that's going to be your first kind of starting point, because then you can share that page to Facebook and social media and what have you. You can put a QR code to that on a flyer that you print to hand out around school or whatever it might be, just making it nice and easy for people to sign up. And then past that, everyone's holiday clubs are slightly different. But I would probably be thinking that, okay, there's going to be an age group structure in this holiday club that may or may not match up with the age group structure you run on a Sunday. Every chance is you might not be running the holiday club for some of those younger age groups, and actually you might break it down more by specific school years or something like that. So I would probably be then thinking, okay, well, in the children module in Churchsuite, you can set up a gathering that kind of helps you organize the children into the specific groupings that you want them to be in. And then you can just bring over that sign up list from your event and allocate the children into those different groups.
Great.
And then what that will end up meaning is that you can, on the day or the days that the holiday club is running, you can run the child check-in system. So you can either run that with printed badges or without. And you can, when a child arrives, you're going to check them in. They're going to be on your system if you've got good safeguarding records. And then when the parent comes to collect them at the end of the day, you can check them out. But you can also make sure that the kind of the security code, the 4-digit number that was allocated to them when they were checked in, that the person who's collecting them has got that correct number, just to make sure you want to make sure, because there's so much stuff with safeguarding. We just want to be so far beyond reproach and showing that we've got really good, robust systems, because that gives confidence to people, and ultimately, this is the gospel's at stake here. So we just got to make sure we're doing these things as well as we possibly can.
Absolutely right.
So yeah, that's kind of a bit of a nutshell of event sign up, your gathering and group structure, child check-in. But then I guess on the back of all that, you've got the ability to communicate out to the parents. Obviously, your own data protection policies are going to dictate how long you've said you will communicate to them, and making sure you're only inviting them. But one of the great things on the back of holiday clubs, I know so many people do, is there'll often be a Sunday service geared towards the holiday club attendees on the back of it. But also, maybe a month later or something like that, just having something that is a follow-on and just an additional contact point to try and just further engagement of the children and the parents of them on the back of it. So communicate out to the sign-ups, thank them for coming, invite them to that next thing. Use the tool to try and get people.
It's great.
involved.
And we've done sort of follow-up feedbacks after and sent out forms for people to say, would you give us give us your thoughts on here 2 or 3 things that we could do better next year, and things like that. And it just you're always creating that vehicle for us to kind of communicate to people, disciple people, advertise things, organize things, bring a sense of order and like you say, confidence to people that interact with us, that we've got the right systems and processes in place, in place that are going to deal with people's information correctly, and all of that is GDPR is no longer a problem with Churchsuite. It just manages it, and I love the fact that you guys have thought through this to serve pastors and serve leaders. Different question then, fire question. I was speaking to a church the other day who said, "Oh, we've got 10 people, and do we really need to sign up to something like Churchsuite?" How would you answer that? I'll tell you how I answered it after.
Yeah. Well, so in all honesty, if you've got 10 people, probably not. If you've got 15 people, maybe not. If you've got 20 people, well, you're probably getting there. If you've got 30 people, basically the question becomes, I think there's a few distinctions that I would encourage people to make. Firstly, there is the distinction of where does this data exist? Who owns this data? How is, you meet someone on the street, you get their phone number, it goes into someone's phone. Maybe you've been evangelizing or on the streets or whatever it might be, and any of those kind of things. It's like, okay, so where's that data going? Is that data going into a personal individual device? Is that going into something that represents the organization? So there's some legalities that we should always be considering. But we don't want to have systems that are too rigid at any one point. But the reality is that at some point, and it's often around about, maybe there's 25 people gathered or something like that. It's around about that point that the bottlenecks start coming up. Because actually the pastor or whoever it might be, they become the only person who's got so and so's contact details. And at that point, everyone's kind of bringing questions to them. Oh, what about this? What about that? And there can be a point of getting overwhelmed. But more than that, actually, the whole idea of using a system like Churchsuite is it helps to distribute data and information so that anyone with the right levels of access and permission can get involved and help to make things happen. If you look at that verse of the church staff are there to prepare the saints for works of service. Like that whole idea of we ourselves and anyone who is kind of a core person within a staff, within a church, whether that's like literally they're working on staff or just they're heavily involved as volunteering. We've got to be looking at, okay, how can we engage other people and deploy others, because there's such a wide variety of gifts that God's put in each one of us for the purpose of ministry. So I think there's got to be that kind of attitude of, right, before we get to that point where someone is a bottleneck, let's bring in a system that can help to disseminate some of the information so that things can continue happening. So what was your answer there?
My answer was yes, absolutely, because I think it's what I realized as I started talking to the person, it was like, actually, you interact with more people in the community than you realize. And actually you've got 10 in your head, but actually that might actually be 20. And how do we have a tool that actually says we'd love to grow, and a tool that actually measures some growth, and actually can give us some data that we could actually start to begin to process and say, actually, when we did our Christmas event, we asked people, would they like to sign up to Alpha? We've got a really easy way, someone can use a QR code and all the information will go in through a form directly into Churchsuite with all the correct permissions already granted. As we started talking about it, I think there was this enthusiasm and actually, okay, so maybe it might not seem cost effective at the minute for 10, or in his mind 10, but actually this is a kind of a commitment to say, actually, we want God to do something in this church and we want to grow, and actually let's get this tool in place now while we've got the time. And then begin to start to see that, and we sort of bouncing back and forth on that. And I think he the pastor got it and said, I think you're right, and they're going to go for it. And I just love that kind of releasing that pastor and saying, I think this is good. And I know there's an older generation, isn't there, that just want to buy the software and keep it, and they still exist to some extent as you interact with older churches, but actually moving to this subscription model and that as the cost grows, as the numbers grow in the church, and your model that allows that to happen means that it's accessible to all churches, and I love that, and I think people, small and big, will be served by it. Any other thoughts on that, mate?
Yeah, well, I think that the cost one is really interesting because if minimum wage is at £13 an hour,
something like that, isn't it now? Yeah,
I can't remember exactly. It ballpark that. Well, a small church starting out with Churchsuite, they're going to be paying more like, I don't know, maybe a tenner a month. I think it's less than that. I should probably know my numbers, but I think it's £7.50. But don't quote me on that. Let's
for the basic module it is, isn't it? Yeah.
And so therefore, actually, if the tool is going to save you even like 45 minutes of time in a month, then it has already paid off.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I think churches sometimes can have a tendency to do is not factor in the amount of time that people kind of give to something. And we kind of think, oh well, I don't think we're ever doing it with a bad heart, or hopefully we're never doing it with a bad heart. But sometimes we overlook the fact that volunteer hours do have a cost. They have a cost to people and to families and what have you. And actually, to spend a little bit of money on a tool that could potentially dramatically reduce the number of hours volunteers need to spend on things, well, actually, that means that people can be redeployed into different areas where perhaps they're getting closer to the kind of the front line of bringing the gospel to people. And so I think that there's my challenge when I'm having those kind of cost conversations with people is kind of to say, well, what is the value you place on an hour of John's time or an hour of Sue's time or whatever it might be? Because actually, even if it's just a couple of pounds a month that you would value their time at, well, by giving them tooling that can help them do more quicker, actually you're opening the possibilities of what other ministry you can do.
Absolutely right.
And that's where God's working. So
absolutely right. And I think it's a conversation we constantly have with leaders and chatting in churches, is that having one or two tools around Churchsuite and around finance packages, like an expense plus, serves treasurers and serves administrative staff. And I know these things can seem daunting and they can take some time to implement, but the investment is worth it, and we see the fruit. And you've probably got hundreds of stories where the fruit has made the system has made a huge difference, and people are seeing fruit in discipleship, in growth in the church, in terms of just being able to manage a church well and be effective. That's happening. Any stories that come to mind where you're aware of that the software has made a big difference? I'd love to give you an opportunity just to kind of share.
Great question. So one that immediately came to mind is, and it's a little bit maybe a couple of years old, something like that. But one of our team was doing some training with a church who were just starting to implement Churchsuite, looking at how do we get this like properly rolled out everywhere. And in the room, I'll talk as if I know the exact details, but I'm a little hazy on some of the details. But let's say there was like 6 or 8 staff members in the room, and as they started looking at the child check-in system, the kind of the kids pastor just started crying, and Paul, who was doing the training at the time, he was like, "I'm really sorry, like, are you all right? What's going on?" and she turned to him. She just said, "No one in the room understands the pressure that I carry on a Sunday. No one has an idea of the kind of that emotional impact of carrying that burden." And she said, "Everything you're showing me here, I know that this is going to make a difference, not only to the church, but also to my personal life." And it's stories like that. Like, wow, we're building software and we're trying to make it like really easy to connect with and easy to use. We want it to have a genuine impact on people's lives, but it's when you hear those kind of things like, wow, that's really special. Like we're honored to be in the position where we get to play a part in not only helping to help kingdom ministry happen, but also for her, like perhaps meaning that when she finishes church on a Sunday lunch, she's not wiped out for the rest of the day, and she's got more energy for friends and family and whatever else it might be. So there are loads of stories. There's other people who've commented a bit like you did earlier that you know, by using flows and forms as part of their newcomer integration process, actually that they've been able to make sure that people haven't slipped through the gaps, and they know where they're at, and that they've done, you know, they've followed through on their own intentions of, okay, this is how we want to welcome people and invite them in. Obviously, you know, software is not the Holy Spirit. Software is not necessarily going to bring people in and help them to step, but software can facilitate those processes to make sure that people are followed up on consistently. And we're opening our arms as well as we possibly can when we're welcoming people into the church. So really exciting to hear little stories here and there.
I love it. There's grace at work in it, isn't there? And it really is great. One last question that doesn't relate to Churchsuite, and I know you've been over to Australia and you've been looking at the churches there. What are some of are there any impacts or any challenges that as you've been interacting with churches, that you think churches in the UK are facing, other difficulties, other challenges that you've become aware of? I think it'd be interesting just to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, great question. Well, I think, you know, one of the hot topics of the day is that of AI. Okay. And what does that mean for the church? Like, you know, on one hand, you know, if you've got consistent admin and organizational processes, like, should we find ways to deploy AI to do all of these things for us that we don't have to do them? And like, oh, that feels awkward. But at the same time, it's like, well, but are there opportunities coming in that actually we could leverage some of those technologies for? We should leverage. And so I think we've got a really interesting point in time coming up where I think we had that kind of revolution where we moved from paper to digital. Yeah. And equally, in that there were benefits, and there were undoubtedly there will also have been things that have been lost in that. And I think we've got another moment coming where, as we grapple with what does AI mean, like, should you have an AI bot that is the thing that is like responding to any inbound inquiries to the church? Like, is that good use of time? Is that bad? Like, where are we drawing some of those lines? And I don't have any answers on those things. But I think there's some interesting conversations. I think there'll be some that actually there are things that we do manually, even with software helping us with those processes, that some of the more automated AI type tooling can take from us, so that we can focus more on people. But I think equally there will be some who go too far, perhaps, and they might see potentially false positive results early, but then they'll have to withdraw from them. And I think with all of this, like, we just need God to give us wisdom on all of these things, because it's not, I don't think AI is bad. I think it's got the potential to do some real good, but I think we need godly wisdom to work out where to draw that line. And it'll be different in many different people's churches. Like, an inner city church, that might make a lot more sense to leverage those kind of tools more there than in perhaps a more rural, smaller setting. And so I don't think it's a one size fits all, but I think there's going to be some really interesting conversations.
It's interesting you mentioned the AI, because I knew of a church that were using some AI to do some of their graphics work. And they were having some graphic design stuff that were coming back from using AI, and it was tremendous. And the cost of what they would normally have to pay out to do something, and that it wasn't exactly right, it wasn't exactly perfect, but they'd begun to start to explore, actually, is this a way for us, because we don't have somebody with that gifting in our church, is this a way for us to use AI to be able to create some engaging posters or material or something, or design? And then, fascinating to start thinking about that. I mean, that could do graphic designers in the church out of a business, but again, it's discussions that are going to come up, isn't it, amongst teams? And
I think it's so one of the things that occurs to me is, it's going to do graphic designers out of business. Well, but I know that was a flippant comment.
Yes,
but,
it is. Yeah.
But like the idea of in pretty much any church, there's going to be some kind of artwork on walls. There's going to be, in an old church that you've got stained glass, and in a more modern church you might have a big canvas print or something like that. And I think there are various things that I've kind of thought in my head of, how far would I go? Would I use AI to generate the artwork for a canvas print that is going to go on the church wall? And I think in my head, I'm kind of thinking like, well, you look back to Old Testament and God giving Bezalel the Holy Spirit so that he would be able to create the artifacts which were there to draw people to worship, the artifacts of the temple. And it's like, well, no, actually, there needs to be, like, for something that is created to draw people towards worship, I think we need to maintain that level of, okay, no, God is inspiring and working through the artist. There is the indwelling Holy Spirit that is inspiring, and things are coming out from that. But for a little flyer or a poster, well, that's a different kind of thing. And so I almost think there's going to be some of these kind of, like, what is the purpose of this piece of artwork? Is it there as a let's worship God through this thing, or is it there as a tool to invite someone along? And maybe some of that will help to shape bits of conversation around it. But I think we're going to get some. We're
going to get some interesting things. And I think this particular church that I was talking about was they were struggling to come up with new ideas for design. And I think the fact that they were able to go, here's 4 or 5 things that we could look at that go, oh, actually, right, we know we've got a bit more clarity of actually what we want and what we actually think is going to appeal. And they were certainly thinking about the kind of the priority of how do we reach the next generation with the gospel? How do we pass on the gospel to the next generation? Our communications, our media, how we present was really important, and I could see why they were exploring in those avenues. But for some churches, the mention of AI hasn't even been on a team agenda, hasn't been something that's talked about. So apologies if you're hearing this for the first time, but maybe we should do a podcast together on, even people just been chatting to us about the metaverse and churches online and using that. And there's some interesting conversations coming out about that. And you must be involved in some of that as well.
Bits and bobs, like, yes, probably more so conversations than I think it's a fascinating area, absolutely fascinating. I love the kind of the motto is a wrong word, but there's a church called Life Church who they say, in order to reach people no one else is reaching, we've got to do things no one else is doing. And so they've kind of gone quite big on doing church online as a way of trying to reach people, and investing a lot of time, energy, money into things like the metaverse. And that's whilst that is not necessarily my cup of tea, I'm not really that taken by VR and stuff like that. I don't really like wearing regular glasses. I don't want to wear VR goggles myself. But there's plenty of people who do. And every one of those needs Jesus just as much as I do and you do. And so I love the fact that God deploys his capital C church all over the place, different people with different passions, so that we can hopefully reach all people everywhere.
And that's so true. And we'll finish on that. And it's so important, isn't it, that your software serves us with what we're most important to us is Christ, isn't it? And the gospel going out. people hearing the good news of Jesus and seeing their lives changed is something that we want to do. And mate, you play a huge part in that. And if you're involved in a local church serving in administration operations, then let hear a thank you and a well done for what you're doing. I don't know what encouragement you have, but you will be making a huge difference in the function of your church, in the running of your church, that enables the gospel to go out. And we are enablers, and that's part of our role and part of our joy. And it's in the background, but I'm happy in that and love that. So Gavin, thank you so much for your time, mate, and giving us giving us this podcast. Love to hear the updates about Australia, and we wish you great wisdom and success in all the stuff that you're doing. I love the fact that you guys are continuing to better this and continue to serve churches. And again, I think this podcast captures your heart for local church, which is absolutely mine. And so, it is our absolute, privilege to promote you and to thank you and to work with you. Please pass on all of that to your team and everyone working at Churchsuite.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Good to have you on. All right. Well, if you're listening to the podcast, we've got another 69 podcasts that we've done. We'd love you to engage with the website. If there's any way that the church office can serve you, whether it be with policies, procedures, whether it be with some training videos, whether it be just, just a friend to talk to for an hour to share experience, then we would love you to get in contact with us, and please let us know. So please check out the website, and please check out Churchsuite. If there's any questions you'd like to follow up, then please get in contact at questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. We'd love to hear from you. All right. Thanks a lot for your time. We'll see you again next time on the podcast.